Welcome to Question Time. Tonight we are in Shrewsbury. On tonight's panel, Simon Hart, first elected as an MP in 2010, previously Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance and appointed Secretary of State for Wales in 2019 by Boris Johnson. Labour's Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence and Safeguarding, issues on which he's campaigned as an MP, and author of best-selling books on why politics matters, Jess Phillips. Daisy Cooper, trained lawyer and psychotherapist, elected in 2019, currently Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats and their spokesperson on health and social care. Danny Sriskandarajah, born in Sri Lanka, now an Australian citizen, formerly Director General of the Royal Commonwealth Society, now Chief Executive of Oxfam UK. And political journalist, author of books on Brexit and on David Cameron, GB News presenter Isabel Oakeshott. Good evening, welcome to my panel, welcome to our audience here in Shrewsbury, good to see you, and of course welcome to you at home. Thank you very much for joining us, and do join in the conversation on social media in the usual way at BBC Question Time, and we'll hear what you think about tonight's topics. Our first question tonight is from Fleur Whittingham.
Hello. Should Boris fall on his sword for not abiding by the very rules he has set us all to live by?
Jess Phillips.
I mean, Fleur, I think that the very basic, simple answer to that is yes. We have to have a basic trust in our politicians, and even as I say this, I can feel people in the audience, both here and at home, think, well, nobody trusts politicians. And that is deeply, deeply problematic, because actually so much of our lives, and more so in the past couple of years than ever before, certainly in my lifetime, have we needed to rely on the respectability and the honesty and integrity of our politicians, because they control everything in our lives, pretty much, where my children go to school, where I get my health services, the kind of roads that I drive on. Like, it really deeply matters. And Boris Johnson, in his activities, I have to say there were plenty of clues leading up to this, but in his activities over the last few weeks, with regard to not even just whether he went to the parties or not, which now we know he did go to the parties, even though he claims that he didn't realise it was a party, so he's either a liar or an idiot. The reality is that he lied about it repeatedly. He kept saying, I haven't broken the rules. He said it in Parliament, which is a breach of the ministerial code to lie to Parliament knowingly. He also put in charge...
He's saying technically this party could be said to fall within the guidance.
I'd like to see that technicality. Also, I don't know how, unless people who worked in Tesco's were also allowed to go out and have a shindig in the car park, or people who live and work in pubs, for example, were they allowed to... Well, they live and work there. This is a unique experience, apart from the fact that we were all working from home at the time and weren't having parties in our garden. But the serious point for me is just the constant lies. Boris Johnson put in charge of the inquiry a man we now find out he knew was at the parties. This is the level of integrity and how seriously he has taken it. He wasn't sorry in Parliament. He said, I'm sorry for the way it's been perceived. What he said is, I'm sorry you feel this way. I'm sorry that people like Hannah Brady and all those whose families died and couldn't be with them, who stood in the garden while he glad-handed them, the same garden where he'd been having a party. He wasn't sorry. He was sorry he got caught.
Simon. Should he resign? That's the basic thrust of the question.
Well, I know that I'm not here to either sort of try and attract sympathy or forgiveness. This is a situation none of us wanted to be in for the reasons which have become all too clear. But I think I'm trying to divide these things into two bits. First of all, the apology that the PM made yesterday, and anybody who knows the PM or saw that and actually heard the words that he uttered yesterday, I genuinely don't think could be anything other than convinced that that was heartfelt, that was a genuine apology. I've got all the expressions in it there.
And so what do you think he was apologising for? Well, was he apologising that he went to the party, or as Jess says, he was apologising for the perception that gave?
No, I mean, I did not get it right. I must take responsibility. With hindsight, I should have sent everybody back inside. I should have recognised that even if it could fall within the guidance, there would be millions and millions of people who simply would not see it that way.
He wasn't apologising for going to the party, was he?
Well, I think that's...
Let's be clear, because that's really important.
Well, it's the other bit. It's the other bit.
Was he apologising for going to the party?
No,
just do you want to answer that question?
The other bit of what I
No, you don't want to answer that question.
No, I do, but I want to...
So was he apologising for going to the party or not?
I want to answer it by referring to the fact that...
Will you say sort of yes or no?
Really?
Well, is it? Have I missed something? Was he apologising for going to the party or not, Simon?
This is such a febrile subject. It obviously generates extraordinary...
I'll have one more go.
It is why...
Do you want to hear the answer to that or not? Was he apologising for going to the party or not, yes or no?
He was apologising for the whole sequence of events. I thought I was pretty clear in the chamber yesterday. But what I try, if I can get a word in, it's to say that I think it really is important that we give the sort of time and space necessary to Sue Gray, former head of proprietary and ethics in the civil service, probably the most respected person in this area, to unpick all of this and to actually present to all of us in Parliament, whether it's party members, whether it's MPs, whether it's opposition, whether it's members of the public, precisely what the facts were. Lots of people have said to me, we don't need an inquiry, we know what happened. Actually, I think we really do need an inquiry, because that will be able to report without fear or favour precisely what happened. And Boris Johnson said he will come back and face colleagues, face people like Jess in that instance. But it's really important that I think, for me at any rate, that we try and stand back from that and to try and be objective. I know that's an unpopular view. I apologise for that, it's an unpopular view. But I do think where there are so many families who are affected by that, it is important.
There's a whole raft of hands there, so let me come to somebody. Yes, the man in the dark blue top over there, yes.
It's disgraceful. I don't even know how he can claim he didn't know it was a party. I mean, he walks out into the garden, sees 40 people there with drinks in their hands. Well, did he not question that or think to himself, what's going on here?
The man in the stripy top. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I'd thrown a party for 100 people in May 2020, I would have been arrested or very heavily fined. I think his position is completely untenable and I think he's got to go.
OK. The man there in the grey suit and white shirt. Yes.
I think Boris Johnson needs to resign. I think any of us in any of our places of work, if we were to do what he's done so far, I'm pretty sure we would have been sacked. And I don't think his position is tenable at this stage.
All right. Yes, the woman at the back there.
I wonder how often it's acceptable to drink wine at work.
Unfortunately, in the Commons, it's quite acceptable. Isabel.
Well, Simon, look, I have to give you credit for coming along here tonight because you are here to defend the quite obviously ludicrously indefensible. I mean, this idea that we have to give Sue Gray time to carry out an inquiry to establish the facts is patently absurd. We've all seen the photographs. He's not denying having been there. And by the way, this isn't just one party. Do you know how many parties there were in Downing Street and across Whitehall? I took the trouble to write a list of all the ones that we know about, and it's 12. And that's just the ones that we know about. Those are the ones in Downing Street. Those are the ones in...
I've got up to 7, but you've got to 12, have you?
They're ones in Whitehall Departments. They're ones possibly in the Downing Street flat. They're the ones at the Conservative Party headquarters. So this wasn't some kind of unfortunate kind of temporary lapse of judgment, a one-off thing. So we know what the facts are, and the truth is it doesn't matter what Sue Gray says. I'm sure she's a highly respectable individual. She's been around for a long time. The court of public opinion has already made its verdict. We hear it here tonight. Boris Johnson is guilty, 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 and he should resign.
Simon, I'll come back to you. Just go around the rest of the camera. I will come back to you, please.
The Prime Minister has broken the law. He has misled Parliament and the public. He should resign and then face a full police investigation. I, like many other MPs, have
The police don't seem too keen to launch an investigation quite yet. They're saying they'll now wait, the Metropolitan Police, they'll wait for the results of Sue Gray's inquiry.
And that smacks of an appalling stitch-up between Number 10 and the Met Police. Sue Gray is a civil servant. She does not have the authority and the legal powers to get people to give evidence on oath. She doesn't have the powers to determine whether people broke the law or not. She can ask people what they think and what they remember, and then she can write it up. But we know what happened the last time that happened. Boris Johnson lied to the last civil servant he appointed to investigate something. He told Lord Guyte that he hadn't, he'd got no recollection of where the money had come from for doing up his flat, and then he had to apologise that actually he had forgotten to mention he'd had WhatsApp exchanges with the donor.
Well, he says he forgot.
Outrageous.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Sorry?
He says that the messages were on an old phone and he couldn't access them and he forgot.
Exactly. Excuses.
Things
The
and
fact is that
mistakes
people around
things
the country were experiencing utter horror at the time. People have told me how they saw their loved one. They knew that their loved ones were dying alone in hospitals and care homes. A friend of mine had to watch her brother take his last breaths on an iPad. And now we know that at the same time, Number 10 had party after party after party. And when they got found out, they lied and then lied and then lied. Boris Johnson has to resign.
I think the strength of the sentiment we hear tonight makes me really worried about what this means for the health of our democracy.
Absolutely.
We've got a triple threat, not just from this party, but from the series of events,
Absolutely.
revelations, allegations over the last few months, which is, it's a threat, it's a questioning of the judgment of our political leaders about whether, they are prepared to and willing to follow the rules. It's a threat about whether they're willing to own up, to be honest and humble when they make mistakes. And it's also a threat about the processes that are being implemented to cast judgment, to hold people to account. And I think there is grave damage being done to public trust in our institutions. Only 1 in 4 of us in this country says they trust government. And yet this is a moment in our history where we should be trusting our public institutions as we respond to this pandemic together. And I'm really worried about what this means in the long term.
I just want to say, first off, anyone who defends him, if you have to say technically he didn't do anything wrong, it normally means they know he did something wrong. But also, you can support a leader and you can support a party and not agree with everything they say. No one agrees 100% with what their party say, but when the leader of that party has lost respect for his integrity and his word and he's got no trust, that's when you have to go, whether or not you support that party or whether or not he is the leader of your party, that there comes a point that his position just cannot be kept. And I personally feel like that's the position that he's currently in.
OK. Man there in the dark blue jacket.
Simon, I must take my hat off to you for actually turning up here tonight. I really wouldn't like to be in your position. However, I must ask you, he said on the 8th of December, I think, in Parliament, there was no party. There was no party, I think that's the quote. How can you continue to support him when he said that, and now we'll find out what's happened today? It's not exactly ambiguous.
Two things. I think the level of anger, I'm not coming here to try and deny that that doesn't exist. I'm not, I genuinely, I hope I don't come across it. I will try to be as helpful as I can and just adding information as I see it, views as I see it to the debate. And I think it was Isabel's point about the court of public opinion that way. I have to say that the appointment of Sue Gray is designed precisely to be able to provide all of the facts that we all need, whether it's police or anybody else, we all need in order to reach...
works for Boris Johnson.
And I think it is quite... I think it is...
He is her boss.
This is only talking about days. We're not talking about weeks or maybe
he's just trying to buy time.
But we're not
That's all
talking
this is.
about a very long time. So, as far as I can tell, as far as my own view is concerned, it is not going to do anything other than help all of us to have a clear, objective, factual separate. Because if any of politicians say this is what happened or what didn't, clearly nobody's going to believe that. So it is better that a senior civil servant says that. And if I can just answer the gentleman's question, can I answer the gentleman's...
You have to have a senior civil servant do it because we can't trust the Prime Minister. So we have to you have to peddle someone out to get the facts because we cannot trust that if the Prime Minister just said, OK, this one did happen, this one didn't, this is what happened to this one, nobody can trust them, so now we have to have this person.
To be fair, quite a lot of opposition, quite a lot of your own party were demanding an inquiry.
I have no problem with there being an inquiry.
Good.
I have to say, Sue Gray is not independent. It doesn't matter how independently minded she is. Sue Gray is a civil servant who I'm sure will do an absolutely brilliant job. I have no reason to doubt or question her. It's like me asking a member of my staff to look into me and then report to me before reporting to Parliament about what I had done wrong. Sue Gray is a government civil servant. She will do a factually based thing, and I've no doubt that she will find the facts. But the reality of the situation is that she is not independent of Boris Johnson.
You want to answer that question?
I think that's very unfair about Sue Gray, actually, underestimating her experience.
I'm not underestimating her, I'm underestimating the Prime Minister.
I did want to ask a gentleman's question, because he said, I think something along like that, how can I continue to swat? And I'll tell you why, because it may be an old-fashioned view, but I actually do believe in the collective responsibility of the government and of the Cabinet. I'm a member of that. I think we are all in leadership roles. We all share a degree of the responsibility for everything that we do, and I think that's absolutely right. I also do believe that in any walk of life, whether it's charity, whether it's public sector, private sector, business, wherever it may be, we fail or we succeed as a team. We win or we lose as a team, and I believe that that is important. And actually, all of my dealings with Boris, which are over quite a lot of years now, have always actually been positive in that respect. So, as I say, I'm not expecting to get a great deal of sympathy for this view, but I do think it is worth just going through this very short process with a very skilled individual, just to make sure that when we get to the end of this, we are all satisfied that all of the facts that we're all striving to ascertain are in front of us, and that we can trust them.
So, Simon, what about the 17,000 ordinary people who got fined or prosecuted for far lesser breaches than the Prime Minister seems to have committed? Did they get the chance for some kind of independent inquiry? Did they get the chance to apologise for it all to just go away? I had two police officers turn up at my door on Easter Sunday to see if I was self-isolating after coming back from work travel. It was Easter Sunday. My self-isolation had finished several days earlier. So clearly the police had the resources to pursue me on something like that. And by the way, one other point, Downing Street is one of the most heavily policed premises in the country. What were the police doing on that occasion and all the other occasions? Were they unaware of what was going on?
Can I just... Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak up in support of the Prime Minister? Yes. Back there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. He's done some really stupid things. But
that doesn't sound fantastically supportive.
But it's all negative. Where's the positives? I mean, he's getting us through this pandemic.
Well,
and what other Prime Minister would have done that?
Okay. Let me just... I'm going to move on a bit, but I just want to ask one question. As we obviously, there have been these calls for the Prime Minister to resign. There are a lot of people in this audience, clearly, who voted Conservative. Can I just ask, have any of you changed your mind about voting Conservative?
Wow, look at that.
That is quite a lot.
Let's just wait till the May elections and see what happens.
Can I just ask for your response to that, Sam?
I can see that with my own eyes. Of course, you know, do I want to come here and see that? Do I want to be in this position? Does Boris Johnson want to be in this position? Of course not. And he said in the statement yesterday there are lots of reasons why we wish we could turn the clock back to May 2020 and do things differently. We're not denying, he's not denying that there were judgments made which wouldn't be made differently now, and he has come to the House of Commons. He has apologised, I think, in a heartfelt way. He's recognised that he, as the head of the government, is ultimately carries the can for these things, and has set out the path by which he thinks we can get to a fair and reasonable conclusion at the end of this very short inquiry. And I really think that is the best way and the fairest way when we stand out.
What on earth does the government think is going to happen when Sue Gray presents her report to the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister has a track record of ignoring all reports of wrongdoing. He defended Dominic Cummings when he broke the lockdown rules. He defended Priti Patel hotel when she was found to be responsible and guilty of breaking the ministerial code. And when the former MP for North Shropshire was found guilty of breaking the rules, the Prime Minister didn't just defend him, the Prime Minister stepped in, tried to rewrite the rules and try and save one of his own. So what on earth do we think is going to happen when Sue presents her report?
But we are all accountable, including the Prime Minister, not only to our party members, to our MPs, but to the public as well. We do live in a society which does have accountability.
My goodness, I don't know if Sue Gray's watching. Her ears must be burning. I mean, her names haven't been mentioned so often on this programme, if indeed ever before. I just want to tell you where we're going to be next week. Next week we'll be in St Andrews, in the north-east of Scotland, of course, and the following week we will be in Morecambe. And then one thing we've noticed in our debates about COVID, which of course we've talked about a lot on this programme, is that we rarely hear from those of you who've chosen not to get vaccinated. And in 3 weeks' time, on the 3rd of February, we're going to be in London, where the vaccination rate is significantly lower than many other parts of the country. And we'd be really interested in exploring why that is. What are you saying, Jess? That's interesting.
It's
Good,
interesting.
well, I'm glad to hear.
No, I think it's
so I think it's an important debate, and we'd very much like to hear from you. So if you've chosen not to get vaccinated, we'd really like to explore that issue. So do get in touch. You can apply by going to the Question Time website, and you can follow the link there, and hopefully we'll hear from you. Right, let's take our next question now, which is from Sarah Adams.
What is the future for Prince Andrew, and how does the news today affect the monarchy?
Danny, now, you were the former head of the Royal Commonwealth Society, so I'm particularly interested in what you've got to say about this.
Well, I think I was very involved in the Commonwealth and saw firsthand how respected the Queen has been. She's held the Commonwealth together for nearly 70 years, and she's held in high esteem by people, by politicians. And the sort of damage that's being done to the monarchy through these allegations, and they're still allegations, matters here in the UK, but I think it will also matter across the world, particularly in the Commonwealth. We saw only a few months ago that Barbados chose to become a republic, and there are many other realms, I suspect, in which people are questioning whether this is an institution they want to be associated with. And it's a shame. This is the year in which the Queen should be proudly celebrating her Platinum Jubilee. And
with Prince Andrew, now that he will no longer be HRH, no longer be able to use that title, and is losing all his military patronages, I mean, what does he do now?
I don't know.
Simon?
Me neither. I think there's to be clear, there is a custom that with a live case of this nature that...
oh, no, we're not going to talk about whether he's guilty or not guilty, and he has denied the allegation, so we'll make that completely clear.
And we, by custom, don't comment on matters involving the royal family, and especially where there's a live case.
What, no comment at all? I mean, he's leading all the news bulletins.
I'm really sorry, but honestly, we don't. It's a well-established custom that within the government we don't comment on matters involving the royal family like this.
OK. Let's hear from our audience then. From you, sir.
Princess.
I would suggest that Prince Andrew takes up residence in a country where there's no extradition rules with the United States.
OK, the man back there in the strappy top.
Him and a sandwich.
If you don't work, you shouldn't get paid. Is Prince Andrew going to carry on? Is the Duke of York going to carry on working? And is he still going to be on the civil list?
I guess we will find this all out. I mean, we're just learning this news as you are. So, yes, the man there in the middle.
One of the options open to Andrew, of course, in the court case is to seek to negotiate a financial settlement. Wouldn't it be morally wrong to do so, given that any finance would ultimately come from the public purse?
I think that he's actually saying that he's going to, well, not he's saying, but the news today is that he will fight it as a private citizen.
Yes, which may mean settling, we just don't know.
But it would mean, I think, that he fights this not as part of the royal family, not with taxpayers' money. It would be my reading of that, is he's fighting it as a private citizen.
But the money he has comes ultimately from either the Queen or properties that he's bought from.
Just to be very clear.
I mean, obviously, the Queen can do what she wants with her money.
Well, she can, of course, but ultimately it was taxpayers' money, wasn't it?
All right. Isabel, what's the future for Prince Andrew, and how does this affect the monarchy?
So I think the good news is that I don't think the Queen is damaged by this at all. I think she stands above it all. She has behaved impeccably in every way.
Do you think she's been decisive? I mean, I don't know about you, this took me by surprise today, this news. I thought it might happen, I didn't necessarily expect it today.
I think that she's done the right thing. I think that he has to go through the process, and the most honourable thing to do would not be to, if he is found to have done anything wrong, he ought not, or if he knows he's done anything wrong, he ought not to try and make it go away using money. He must go through the process, particularly for the sake of the victims. But I am worried about what happens to the monarchy after the Queen is no longer with us. And I think you make a really important point about the Commonwealth. We've already seen Barbados breaking away. I think that the future is looking quite bleak in terms of the Commonwealth. We're not using the Commonwealth properly. The opportunities that we have post-Brexit to do that, we really need to be making more of.
OK. The woman there in the red top.
I'd just like to say that as a mother of a son, I find it hard to imagine the conversation that was had there. But I would also like to comment that I find it quite humorous that Simon had an awful lot to say on the last question, in spite of repeatedly being asked for a yes or no answer. And yet he's not able to make any comment on this question.
All right, well, I don't think you're going to be drawn, are you, Simon, on the future of Prince Andrew?
I think the two subjects were very, very different. I'm a member of the government. I'm not a member of the royal family, so I think the two things can be.
Well, neither are any of us, but not on my notice. But we were all. Neither's anyone here, but they're still commenting.
Can be separated.
It's interesting the point you make there about conversations between a mother and son. As you know, a mother myself, I mean, it tends to be more along the line of, you know, can you pull your weight with the washing up, as opposed to this level of conversation. I mean, it must have been pretty difficult.
I'm a mother of sons myself, and look, the Queen, I think, has done the right thing today without question. I think she's acted decisively, and you know, I'm not going to sit in judgment. I think it's absolutely right that takes place in a court of law. And do you think it affects the monarchy? Do you think it damages the monarchy? I think had this decision not been made today, I was worried about a week ago that actually the longer the sort of questions came out, the longer that they didn't take decisive action, that it could potentially tarnish people's view of the Queen. But I think that the Queen will come out of this untarnished, by and large, for those who have good faith. And understand the humanity, like, there before the grace of God go any of us, that we have family members that we're not necessarily all always in total agreement with their behaviours. The Queen is in a different situation because her family is like a business, it is an institution, it is a public thing, and so it must be very painful for her just as a mother, even though we consider it as being something that we all own.
And what about Prince Andrew himself?
I don't know that he has any future, but I have to say I'm not entirely sure what he was doing before.
OK. The man there in the grey suit and white shirt, yes.
Thank you. I think the Queen has acted very responsibly, unlike the Conservative Party, I'm afraid. And I think that what we're seeing here, and I think what we're seeing here is actually a decisive leader, a leader that is loved across the world. And this is the sort of thing we expect from our political leaders as well. Now, thank you.
Fiona. And in the blue sweater.
Yeah, thanks. I think the decision by the Queen today will give the royal family far more respect in terms of that difficult decision with her son. I mean, there must be a bond there, but to make that difficult decision must have been very difficult for the Queen. But in several years' time, and he's disappeared, then will it all be forgotten about and the monarchy will move on?
Daisy, do you think the monarchy has been damaged by this?
I think the monarchy has been damaged by these allegations that are very serious, but I think by acting swiftly today, they've taken the right decision, and it's a decision made for reputation management. Whatever you think of the monarchy, I think all of us have got a soft spot and a lot of respect for the Queen. You'd have to have a heart of stone to have not felt incredibly sad for her when she sat alone in the Abbey at that funeral. And so I think we have to separate, as Isabel said, the Queen is often above these things, and I'm sure that will continue.
I think there's a golden thread running through so many of the news stories this week, you know, whether it's about the behaviour of our senior politicians in COVID lockdown, this story, or even the one about Novak Djokovic and whether he abided by the rules in Australia. And that thread is about whether all of us have to live under the same rules, and if there really are double standards for the rich, for our leaders, for superstars. And that really worries me and frustrates me that this is a moment in human history when we thought we were all in this together. This was, the virus was a great leveler, we were going to come together. And yet, month after month, week after week, we're getting stories where not everyone seems to have to play by the same rules. And in some ways, then, the action by Her Majesty today at least addresses that perception on this particular issue. But we do need to see that across all of these other aspects of elites having a different set of rules.
I'm going to move on, take another question from Jessica Lozano-Leon.
Should unvaccinated people be penalised at work?
Yeah, and the context for this, Jessica, comes where you've got companies like Next, IKEA, Wessex Water, who are suggesting that unvaccinated staff should only get statutory sick pay as opposed to the full sick pay if they've been exposed to COVID, perhaps because someone in their family has been exposed to COVID and they need to take time off. Isabel?
Absolutely not. I don't think anybody should be punished or persecuted, and especially not mandated to have vaccines. I don't think that is the approach to take, and I'm particularly concerned about it in relation to the mandate within the NHS, the no jab, no job mandate. I think the NHS has a massive workforce problem. It's a workforce crisis, and it can ill afford to lose hundreds, possibly thousands of consultants, of nurses and many other healthcare professionals who, for a whole variety of reasons, feel that it's not in their best interest to have the vaccine. I think all of this might be a bit more justifiable, even though I would still have a fundamental moral problem with trying to force people to have vaccinations or make life for them so difficult if they don't. It might be more justifiable if there was compelling and overwhelming evidence that having the vaccine stopped you transmitting coronavirus to other people. And unfortunately, we know that the vaccine doesn't do that. So I just cannot see the grounds for it.
Simon?
Us, the government, are against mandatory vaccinations. I think the reasons for that are quite clear. That is against the background that 90% of people, I think at the moment, might be wrong by a couple of days, who are in intensive care are either unvaccinated or haven't had their third booster jab. But that still doesn't justify mandatory vaccinations in the way that they have been discussed and put forward by certain people. And I
mean, businesses are basically not waiting for the government, and they're just making these decisions.
And they have to make decisions which are within the constraints of the law in the UK.
And do you support those decisions?
Sorry?
Do you support those decisions?
I'm uncomfortable with it. Because I'm uncomfortable with the notion of mandatory vaccinations anyway. I'm uncomfortable with any suggestion that even in the manner which has been described in the companies that you've described, that may be a way forward. I don't feel instinctively that is either appropriate or proportionate or necessary.
So do you think it shouldn't be happening in the NHS?
It's not necessarily for the government to interfere with individual companies' policies, unless they fall outside the law.
But do you think it should be happening in the NHS then? Because of course that is something the government is pushing.
Yeah, I think there are in many walks of life there are certain circumstances where you have to achieve a certain degree of you have to recognise the workspace in which you are operating. But I think, and I hope that we've been careful, let's say, to be proportionate about that. We've always tried to look at these things as by encouragement, by persuasion rather than by force. And I think that actually the staff take-up of the vaccination programs within the NHS and across the rest of the workforce and public take-up has been a fantastic success, which means that we don't have to do what has been suggested by one or two of the companies which have been mentioned tonight.
I'm a bit confused though, because the government is making it mandatory in the NHS, so you are having to do that.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the NHS, where people are actually working frontline situations with vulnerable people. That's a slightly different situation to some of the companies which form the basis of the original question.
Yes, the man there.
On the mandatory vaccination for the NHS workers, why is it any of the government's business what individuals choose to put into their bodies? And especially when the NHS workers have worked so hard over the pandemic to stop this disease from spreading, Why is it any of the government's business what medical procedures people have?
Do you work in NHS?
No.
Right. OK. Daisy?
Well, I do think there are a lot of people who are very anxious about their loved ones going into a hospital and being treated by somebody who is unvaccinated. That said, I am against coercion for a couple of reasons and mandatory vaccinations. One, there is a point of principle. We have to persuade people rather than coercing them. But secondly, there's evidence that suggests that it can be counterproductive. If you try to coerce people into having a vaccination or you have the threat of coercion, then those people who are slightly hesitant can become ingrained and become incredibly sceptic. So there are lots of really good examples of things that are happening around the country to drive up vaccination rates amongst the unvaccinated. And just a couple of days ago, I was trying to encourage the government to take up some of those good ideas and to roll them out nationally. You know, we could be doing vaccine tracing. We could be doing on-the-spot offers of vaccinations for people who have, when they come into contact with the NHS. We could be offering free cabs to people to get them to their vaccinations when they can't afford to go because of the cost or caring arrangements. There are lots more things that we can be doing to drive up vaccination rates. I'm incredibly pro-vaccine, but it needs to be done through persuasion.
And Danny, in terms of the organisation you work for, Oxfam UK, what's your position on making it mandatory for staff to be vaccinated?
So we haven't, but I do empathise with all employers. Any institution has to make a really difficult judgment call about how to create the best environment, the safest, most productive environment. But, you know, Fiona, to be honest, this is the ultimate first world problem. You know, we're talking about the choice of whether to have a vaccine or not. You know, the vast majority of people in the developing world haven't even had a chance to have a vaccine. And I was on this programme 9 months ago. I asked the minister then why the UK government was blocking compulsory intellectual property waivers on the vaccine technology. I was given a half an answer. Since then, 1.7 million people have died in poorer countries. There's 36 million of us in the UK who've been lucky enough to get a booster. That's more than the first doses that have been administered in the poorest countries in the world. And our government is one of the few governments in the world that's blocking the compulsory transfer of intellectual property rights. Joe Biden is supporting it, the First Minister of Scotland and Wales is supporting it, a whole range of other governments, and yet our government is stopping the single most important thing to vaccinating the world, which in turn will make us all safer.
I'm going to come to the audience, but do you just want to answer that quickly, Sam?
I want to just pick up on the previous point, actually.
Well, I just wonder if you just want to answer Danny's point he was making about the fact that the government
I don't
is
think there's
blocking
any dispute that I think one of those early comments by Chief Medical Officer, in one, I can't remember which one it was, who said that none of us are vaccinated till we're all vaccinated, in a global context, that is. I don't think anybody disputes that. But, of course, you know, the decisions have to be made about how you achieve that. And, you know, I think we want to get to where you want to get. I think we're in agreement on that.
No, well, I'm afraid not, because I think the UK government is one of the few governments that's resisting, in negotiations in the World Trade Organization, the compulsory licensing of vaccine technology. We know the technology, it's relatively cheap to produce. There are factories, production facilities all around the world that could be making this vaccine in huge numbers, but aren't, because governments like ours are protecting the interests of a few big pharmaceuticals over the interests of the world.
And the government has only given a tenth of the vaccines that it promised.
It's not about protecting pharmaceuticals, it's about protecting human beings. I recognise we're probably not going to be at the same place at the same pace, but actually the principles that you set out, Danny, I think are entirely justifiable. I agree, and you know, we'll get there.
Let's hear from our audience. The woman in the red jacket.
Going back to the question that was asked, companies changing sick pay, it's got lots of implications for employees. Will they go into work with COVID, for instance? They're going to have more anxiety and depression because they're going to be worried about their pay. I'm an occupational health nurse, and we have this all the time. They're worried about their sick pay. It's often stopped for other reasons.
And the man behind you, yes, in the grey suit.
Thank you. Yeah. Is this problem made worse by influencers, people of power, who aren't having the vaccine, thinking of Novak, and that influencing people not to get the vaccine rather than some of the medical conditions they may have that would stop them?
Novak Djokovic, of course, you're referring to in the Australian Open. Yes, the man here.
Yeah. You can't make it compulsory. What else is going to... It's a thin end of the wedge. You know, people will... There'll be a consensus. Everybody, pretty much, 90-odd% of people know that it's a good idea to be vaccinated and boosted. So we don't need to be told that. We're not a totalitarian society.
I mean, there are. I mean, there's a plumbing company, for example, here that has said it will only employ vaccinated staff. There are banks in the US who will only employ vaccinated staff, and you've got these companies who are not saying that, but they're saying you'll be penalised in other ways if you're not vaccinated.
Well, perhaps the government should put some legislation in to stop that, because these people are picking and choosing. Whereas and I disagree with what you say, Simon. It is about pharmaceuticals. It is about money, and that's why they should unlock it and let everybody have it. So I think you're wrong there.
Jess, are these companies, I'll come back to you as well, are these companies overreaching themselves with these kinds of decisions?
Look, I can understand where they're coming from, and I imagine that they're sort of thinking that it's a civic responsibility to try and encourage people to take the vaccine. I can understand that. I just don't think it will work. I think it will have the exact opposite effect, as the lady who asked the question pointed out when she made her comment. I think that if you just give people statutory sick pay, what you're going to end up seeing is people not telling when they've got COVID. Now, of course, Novak Djokovic did that as well. Went to work when he had COVID. I'm interested in things that will work, and I just don't think that mandatory vaccinations necessarily work. I do think that it's right that employers seek to find ways to encourage people to have it. But you do think it's right that they're mandatory in the NHS? I mean, that's a Labour position. When you say I think it's right, I think that there is a certain safety perspective. Like, my husband works on a building site. He's not allowed onto that building site without wearing a hard hat, which he always does.
But that's quite a different thing to injecting something into your body, you could argue.
Oh, but actually, there's also within the NHS. I'm not here. I don't feel comfortable with anybody being told that they have to do anything particularly beyond, living within the rules that don't harm other people. But actually, within the NHS, you'd have to have other vaccinations as well. So I come from an area of the country where TB was in a resurgence. And so when they'd stopped vaccinating people, they vaccinated people in hospitals in Birmingham against TB, for example, for their protection. And you would probably, certainly in certain places, have to be vaccinated against that because you can spread the virus. So I can understand it much more in a place where people are clinically vulnerable. But I think it goes to what Isabel said, actually. And, I don't like to find myself agreeing with it, too much here, Isabel.
Dangerous.
But it goes to the point that the reason why it's difficult to make it mandatory is one of the reasons is that people will argue about the spread. It doesn't necessarily stop the spread. And that's why testing is so vitally important, and why any passport or vaccination system has to rely on testing. And at the moment, I'm afraid to say that the testing system... I ordered a box of tests a week ago because I had to take one every day because I was near Keir Starmer, who seems to often be coming down with COVID. You have to be able to access tests. My children haven't been given 2 tests a week to go to school. The testing regime is vitally, vitally important to stop the system where it feels like jabs is the only answer. However, everybody should definitely get jabbed. I'd do it every day and twice on Sunday.
Yeah. Isabel, you want to come back in?
I wouldn't do it every day and twice on Sunday. Simon, can I just come back to you? Do you know how many job vacancies there are in the NHS?
Sorry,
do you know how many vacancies there are in the NHS for healthcare professionals?
No.
Well, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of vacancies. Do you know how many people are on the NHS waiting list?
Yeah, well,
6 million. I shall answer. I mean, it seems slightly
And finally,
unfair
how many
to put
people
him
have
on
been
the spot. He's a
waiting
Welsh
more
secretary,
than
not
a
Health
year?
Secretary.
it's devolved in Wales. It's calculated in a rather different way.
It's not a good situation in Wales, I can tell you. An awful lot of people have also been waiting more than a year for treatment. Under those circumstances, are you really comfortable with firing consultants who, with all their medical expertise, have made an informed decision that they don't want or need to have multiple vaccines against coronavirus? Are you really happy with throwing them on the unemployment job heap?
These decisions have to be taken on the basis of public safety. And when you phrase it like that, it suggests that somehow there is an act of vindictiveness. It's actually quite the opposite.
I'm just asking you a pragmatic question.
Throughout the whole pandemic, and I think you almost, dare I say, almost deliberately undermined the people who've been doing the greatest amount of work in this, and by which I don't mean, by the way, politicians, but I think it is all of the effort which is being made to get ahead of the various different strains of coronavirus, which has haunted us for such a long time now. All of the decisions that have been taken have been about saving lives and helping people. And I think this idea that somehow you're portraying this as a situation where the government is actually trying to take people out of the health service
but that's the reality of what you're doing.
In order to cause hardship for people who rely on the health service.
No, but that's a consequence.
In order to make a political point
without the vaccine,
about vaccinations,
more doctors and nurses wouldn't be in there. It wouldn't be able to be there without the vaccine. So there is a pragmatism on both sides of this, because if we had no vaccines,
absolutely,
the amount. I mean, there's 30 teachers off at my kids' school at the moment. How many staff would not be there if it weren't for the vaccine?
It is all about making sure that the lives are saved and the treatment is as good as we can get it. It is not about some underlying suspicious conspiratorial story about getting rid of
Well, tell you what, I'm going to move on a minute, but is there anyone here who works in the NHS who wants to... You, sir, what's your view on this?
So, my view on this is that I think the government needs to mandate people to take vaccines, especially in the NHS. I think it protects our patients, and I think it is really unfair that we blow this up about what? I don't know how many percentage actually are not wanting to be vaccinated. Nearly 95% or more of those of us that live in this country are vaccinated. I think the bigger worry for me is the number of billions of doses that appear to have gone to waste, that are expired, and many of these third world countries or low-income countries aren't getting these vaccines. And I don't think we should be blocking the intellectual rights from being made open so that people can actually make these vaccines in their own countries so that they can get them and we can end this silly pandemic.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take another question from Kevin Harris.
Has wokeness got out of control as a well-known supermarket has announced the changing name of classic sweets?
So I think, Kevin, I'm assuming you're referring to M&S.
Yes.
Which is changing the name. Is this news to you, Jess?
Yes,
Let me inform you.
It's all about midget
Get up
gems.
to speed quick, then. M&S are changing the name of their well-known sweets. Actually, they're not the only ones that make them. Midget gems to mini gems. And they're saying they're doing that to avoid offending people with dwarfism. Because they say midget can be used as a term of offence, and it can be derogatory and as I say, very offensive. Well, Kevin, you obviously don't agree with that.
To be honest, I think it's wokeism gone mad. Every day new things pop up, and I just don't understand the reason behind it. These things have been in circulation since 1900, and what's changed in the last 10 years? I just don't understand why people are getting all let up about it.
All right, Daisy.
Well, this is complete news to me.
Oh my God! You guys not been keeping. You knew you were coming on the programme. Come on, keep up.
Completely passed me by this one. I guess what I would say is that I want us to live in an inclusive society. I think over time, there are words that never caused offence in the past that do cause offence now, and there are words we're probably using now that none of us realise are offensive that might be offensive in future. And so I think it's important that when people explain that there are words that are offensive to them and derogatory to them, that things do catch up. But when it comes to sweets, I have to say the thing that upsets me more is when the packets get smaller and smaller. So that's my biggest concern.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. Very much so. Danny.
Look, I think language evolves, and I'm happier for it, because, there are words that we feel deeply uncomfortable using today that we might have used 20, 30 years ago, and I think we have to accept that. But one thing I do worry about is this temptation to, talk about these individual decisions and then make this about a woke, anti-woke agenda. I think in the culture wars, none of us will win.
Yeah.
If we start to reduce these debates about us and them, we're going to deepen the divides in our society, and I think we have to have a much more inclusive and tolerant discussion about some of these difficult judgment calls that all of our institutions or all of us as individuals have to make. And I really worry about the divides that are seeping into the way that we talk about these sorts of decisions.
Isabel?
Oh, I mean, it won't surprise you to hear that I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, how far are we going to take this? Are we going to change Mars to Venus in case it's over-associated with males? Are we going to change Smarties to Thickies in case it offends people with a less intellectual prowess? I don't know. I think it's absurd.
I think our Thickie would definitely be more offensive than Smartie. But, I mean, well, the thing is, what M&S is saying, and incidentally Tesco are reviewing the name of the product as well, M&S is saying the change is a result of a campaign by Dr Erin Pritchard. Now, she is a lecturer in disability studies at Liverpool Hope University. She says the word midget has roots in Victorian freak shows and its origin automatically dehumanises people like me because she's a person with dwarfism. Are you swayed by that?
I mean, has anyone ever eaten a packet of midget gems and then gone out and been mean to people with that condition? I don't think they will have done. I think it's an impossible corporate position for the company. Once they're at the sharp end of a campaign like that, they've probably got to fall into line, but it seems an awful waste of energy.
Woman here in the front.
I kind of think it's a case of people just choosing to be annoyed with something. Because for me, like, I don't care whether it said on the, I think it was Yorkie bars, you know, not for girls. I don't care who they said it was for. I don't care whether the Kleenex were man size or girl size. If I needed to blow my nose, I used Kleenex. If I wanted a Yorkie, I'd have had a Yorkie. And I think rather than getting so, like, het up about the name of it, if they taste the same and the packaging is pretty much the same and there's the same amount of them in the packet, 100% agree with you on that, then it doesn't really affect the consumer in any way. And I think there's much bigger things, especially when it comes to inequality, for people to be annoyed about. But I also do feel like, as a society, as you were saying, language changes, and we need to be mindful that just because 50, 60, 70 years ago it wasn't offensive, it doesn't lessen the offence that could give someone now. And it's not about saying, oh, it's a snowflake generation or wokeism gone mad. It's just about people just being a little bit considerate about something that they might not have an experience in and understanding that other people have that.
But then that's an argument for not keeping the name.
Yeah. I don't have a problem either way because I'm not affected by that name. So there's no problem with someone changing something if it doesn't hurt anybody else, if it makes someone else more comfortable. Like I said, for me personally, as long as the tissues are the same and the chocolate's the same and the sweets in the bag are the same, then really there's much better things for people to be annoyed about than a company changing a name.
All right. The woman in the back there in the pink trousers. Yeah.
I agree that there's much more important things to be talking about. So why do we care about sweets? Just change the name and then eat them. I don't know why people get upset. I think it's brilliant, and we should absolutely be more PC. I think the fact that people are upset that they're changing sweets, just be accommodating. Don't you want to live in a society where people feel comfortable to eat a sweet? Surely that's one of the most basic first world human rights anyone has.
So when Kevin says behind you it's wokeness gone mad, I think, paraphrasing what you're saying, Kevin, forgive me.
Absolutely not. This is... Because there are much, much more important things to be worrying about. Just change the name of a sweet, and then we can talk about things that are much more pressing.
Kevin, you wanted to... No, Kevin, let's hear from you again.
So, if there's much more things to worry about, why bother changing it in the first place?
Well, because
It's one person.
It's not one person.
In Liverpool, one person at that university has said that they should change, and that's what's happened.
But that's because she's representing an entire group of people who were oppressed.
She was not disabled.
Yes,
she does have dwarfism,
she was,
yes.
but nobody else who was part of the investigation, I think.
But she's speaking on behalf.
I couldn't tell you.
No.
But OK, Jess, wade in. Come on, now you're up to speed now. Come on.
Now that you're raring, I didn't even know midget gems still existed. If
Where
I'm
have you
perfectly
been?
honest, I think they seem like quite an old-fashioned sweet midget gems. But what I would say is actually to the point of the two women who have spoken, is that you have to be really, really careful when these things happen. It happens because apparently loads of people have been really annoyed about it. Often that's manufactured and it is not seen. And also, loads of people won't be annoyed that they change. I mean, I'm still annoyed about them not being called marathons and turning it to Snickers because it's an Americanism. And I was raised by somebody who would point that out to me constantly. And SIF instead of GIF. Like, you know, these are... In the grand scheme of things, they are... It doesn't really matter.
But it obviously matters to some people.
But if it makes so, therefore, it doesn't hurt me in any way or upset me in any way. It's like some of the statue conversations that have gone on this week. Like, you know, I will focus on the stone people I don't like and the stone images of children when actual child abuse starts to end in society. I've got to focus on that because I can't be dealing with... You know, I spend all my days and all day tomorrow I will spend with victims of sexual exploitation. I mean, eat whatever sweets, call them whatever you like. Your key, have your advertising campaign if it grabs people for a certain reason. But fundamentally, like, just try and be as nice as you possibly can be and include as many people as you possibly can be, but try not to worry about these things quite so much.
Simon.
I don't know whether Daisy and Jess will agree, but as MPs we get hundreds of letters and emails every day on hundreds of very diverse subjects. In 12 years of doing this job and a couple of years of doing it in a sort of government capacity, never at any stage has anybody ever written to me about this subject. And believe me, they have written to me about a lot of other subjects, some of them which are...
You're going to get some letters today.
Yeah, precisely. Well, different from the ones I've been getting today anyway.
Do tell us about those. Come on.
But the point is, honestly, that our constituents are a very good litmus test, a very good temperature gauge, they're very good at flagging things up which we might not normally spot. And honestly, this has never come anywhere near my system at all.
So do you think M&S is right to do it?
Well, language, you've got to be careful with language, obviously, but I mean, they're entitled, as I think one of the questions said, they're entitled to do what they want, how they want. I wonder if it's actually got more to do with marketing than actually anything else. I'm always suspicious when these rebrands are dressed up as some kind of statement, but actually I wonder if
Opal
they really
Fruits is another one.
Yeah,
but for a completely different reason. And then we've got a little bit more time. Let's hear from our audience. Yes, the man in the green top.
Yes, language changes with the times, but especially with the current PC movement, does it get to the point where you start to legislate speech?
OK, man here in the spotty top.
Yeah, I've just thought of an advertising campaign and possibly we could get another job for Prince Andrew.
Maybe we shouldn't hear that advertising campaign. You never know. Let's stay on the right side of the law, certainly, for one thing. The man at the back. Yes, you, sir.
That's right. Are these must be people just sitting around thinking of ideas? You know, just move on.
Well, I've been looking into this a bit today, and Warwick Davis, who's a well-known actor, a person with dwarfism, he has said that he finds midget offensive. Oh, so it's not necessarily people just sitting around with nothing better to do. Does that affect your opinion at all?
Well, it's the same thing with when we had the discussion about Boris.
Oh, we're back to Boris again. We're going to go full circle.
And all this old news about what it cost to do his flat up and all this. You know, just move away from it.
Your defence of Boris Johnson so far has to say that he did silly things and then remind everybody that he did his flat up. So I'm not sure he'd be all that grateful to you. If it offends people, then surely we shouldn't... Well, as a society, we don't want to... Like, you know, you wouldn't... There are words I will not say here now, but you wouldn't eat a chocolate bar that had racist slurs written on them. You just wouldn't, and you wouldn't have... like, you know, sort of bitch smarties. You wouldn't think that was acceptable anymore. It doesn't hurt anybody to change these things, and if it hurts people to have them, the trouble is that we're making out like we're saying that the person who eats the midget gems is offensive, and you're taking everybody down like it's deeply offensive if you don't agree with me. Sometimes we're not always going to agree. Let's all just try and get on.
Should we have that as a mantra for question time? Let's all try and get on. Tune in next week and see how that goes. Right, OK, our time is up. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to all of you from Shrewsbury coming here tonight. And, of course, thank you very much to you at home for watching. From Question Time, bye-bye.